The water was black and freezing. It felt like thousands of tiny needles pressing into my skin. The car was sinking fast into the muddy depths of the river. Outside, the flash flood roared, a monster of rain and wind that had snatched us off the road in a heartbeat. Inside, the only sound was the muffled thumping of my own heart and the frantic splashing of my twin sister, Myria, in the backseat. I looked at Darius, my husband, the man who had promised to protect me until his last breath. He was struggling with his seatbelt. The water was already up to our chests. "Darius, help me," I screamed. My voice was thin and raspy. He finally broke free. He looked at me, then he looked past me at Myria. I reached out my hand, my fingers brushing his soaked shirt. I was wearing the bright silver necklace he had given me for our anniversary, a locket with our wedding photo inside. It caught the dim light from the dashboard. He saw it. He knew exactly who I was. But he didn't grab my hand. He looked into my eyes with a cold, terrifying clarity. Then he kicked my hand away. He turned his back on me and lunged for Myria. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the broken window. I watched, paralyzed, as he hauled her out into the dark current. He didn't look back. He didn't try to reach back for me. He left me in the metal tomb. The last thing I saw before the water covered my head was the two of them breaking the surface together. The current grabbed the car and flipped it. I was swept out of the window and into the black void. As the air left my lungs, one thought burned in my mind. My husband just murdered me. He chose her. He chose my sister. I woke up face down in the mud. My lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. Every breath was a battle. I didn't know how long I had been floating or how many miles the river had carried me. My clothes were shredded, and my silver locket was gone. I dragged myself up the bank, my fingernails digging into the dirt. I saw the glowing sign of a gas station about a half-mile away. I moved like a ghost, shivering so hard my teeth clicked together. Inside the gas station, a small TV was humming behind the counter. The news was on. I saw a picture of my own face, or rather, Myria's face. Then I saw Darius. He was wrapped in a blanket, sitting on the back of an ambulance. He was crying, his face buried in his hands. "It was so dark," he sobbed to the reporter. "I grabbed her. I thought I had my wife. I thought I was saving Serafina when we got to the shore and I saw it was Myria. I tried to go back. I swear I tried." Myria was sitting right next to him. She wasn't crying. She was leaning against his shoulder, her hand resting on his knee. She looked at him with a look that wasn't grief. It was possession. I stood there, dripping wet and shivering, and I realized the truth. They didn't look like two people who had just lost a sister and a wife. They looked like two people who had finally gotten what they wanted. They were having an affair. The mistake in the water was no mistake at all. It was an opportunity. I looked at the phone on the wall. I could call the police. I could go back and reveal the lie. But if I did, I would be going back to a man who wanted me dead. "No," I whispered to the empty aisles. "Serafina is dead." I walked out of the gas station and into the night. I didn't go home. I vanished. 10 years later, the halls of St. Jude's Hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. It was a clean, sharp smell that I loved. It was the smell of control. I walked quickly, my white coat snapping behind me. My name tag read, Dr. Serafina Vane, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. I had spent a decade rebuilding myself. I had changed my last name, moved 3 states away, and buried myself in books and blood. I was no longer the girl who screamed for help in a sinking car. I was the woman who fixed the hearts of others because mine was made of ice. "Dr. Vane, we have a code blue in room 402, a nurse called out. I didn't run. I moved with a steady, robotic speed. I entered the room and took over the chest compressions. My movements were perfect. I didn't feel panic. I only saw a machine that needed to be restarted. After 5 minutes, the patient's heart rhythm returned to the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. "Good job, everyone," I said, my voice flat. I stripped off my gloves and walked out. "You're a machine, Serafina," a voice said. I turned to see Dr. Solomon. He was the head of anesthesia and the only person in this building who even tried to get close to me. He was kind, with warm eyes and a smile that usually made people feel safe. "I'm a surgeon, Solomon," I replied, not stopping. "Machines don't make mistakes, people do." "Everyone needs a break," he said, walking beside me. "Let's get dinner tonight, just one meal where we don't talk about valves or bypasses." "I have charts to review," I said. I liked Solomon, but I didn't trust people. Trust was a luxury I had lost in a cold river 10 years ago. I kept my walls high and my heart locked away. It was the only way to stay alive. The pager on my hip buzzed with a VIP alert. A helicopter was landing on the roof. In this hospital, VIPs usually meant high-profile politicians or tech billionaires. They were the cases I usually handled because I didn't care about their money or their fame. I only cared about the surgery. I walked up to the helipad as the blades slowed down. A transport team wheeled a gurney inside. I grabbed the chart from the flight nurse. "Female, 32 years old," the nurse shouted over the wind. "End-stage heart failure. She's been on the list for 6 months, but her condition just took a nosedive. She needs a transplant yesterday." I opened the folder as we entered the elevator. I looked at the patient's name. Myria Thorne. The air suddenly left the elevator. My lungs felt like they were filling with water again. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. Myria, my twin, my shadow, the woman who stole my life while I was still breathing. I looked down at the next of kin section. Darius Thorne, husband. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild, trapped animal. 10 years. I had spent 10 years thinking I was safe. I had spent 10 years convincing myself they were gone, and now fate had delivered them directly to my doorstep. "Dr. Vane, are you okay?" the nurse asked, looking at me with concern. I realized I was gripping the chart so hard the plastic was cracking. I took a deep breath, forcing the ice back into my veins. I adjusted my surgical mask and pulled my cap low. "I'm fine," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "Prep the VIP suite. I need to do an initial assessment." I wasn't just the surgeon anymore. I was the judge. I was the one who decided who lived and who died. And for the first time in a decade, I felt a flicker of the fire I thought had been put out in the river. The VIP suite was quiet, except for the rhythmic wheezing of the oxygen machine. I stood outside the door for a long minute, adjusting my mask. I looked through the small glass window. There she was. Myria looked terrible. Her skin was a sickly gray color, and her lips had a blue tint. She looked much older than 32. The beauty she had used like a weapon was fading, leaving behind a sharp, bitter-looking woman. And then there was Darius. He was sitting in a chair by the bed, staring at his phone. He looked tired. His hair was thinning, and he had a permanent frown etched into his face. He didn't look like a man in love. He looked like a man who was trapped in a room he didn't want to be in. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Who are you?" Myria snapped, her voice weak but still full of venom. "Where is the chief? I was told the chief was coming." "I am the chief," I said. Darius looked up. He froze. I could see the confusion in his eyes. He heard my voice, the voice he hadn't heard in 10 years, the voice that had screamed his name while the water rose. I reached up and slowly pulled down my mask. Darius stood up so fast his chair fell over. His face went white, then a strange, mottled red. "Serafina," he whispered. Myria's eyes went wide. She tried to sit up, coughing violently. "No," she gasped. "You're dead, you drowned, we saw you go under." "I'm a better swimmer than you thought, Myria," I said, walking to the foot of the bed. I picked up her chart and clicked my pen. "And it turns out I'm also a better surgeon. Hello, Darius. Hello, sister. It's been a long time." The silence in the room was heavy. Darius looked like he was seeing a ghost, and Myria looked like she had just seen her own executioner. They had spent 10 years building a life on my grave, and now I was the only person who could keep them from joining me in it. "Serafina, I can explain," Darius stammered. He followed me out into the hallway after I finished the basic checkup. He was shaking, his hands reaching out as if to touch me, then pulling back in fear. "There's nothing to explain, Darius," I said, not looking at him. I was writing notes on the digital tablet. I saw what I saw. I felt what I felt. It was the dark, he hissed, his voice desperate. He tried to step in front of me, forcing me to stop. The water was moving so fast. I thought I had you. I swear I thought Myria was you. When we got to the bank and I realized. I tried to go back into the river. The police had to hold me back. I finally looked up. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. The police didn't hold you back, Darius. I watched you from the bank a mile downriver. I saw the news. You didn't look for me. You didn't even call the morgues. I did, he lied. You cashed my life insurance policy 3 months later, I said, my voice like a scalpel. I checked the public records years ago. You took that money and bought the house we used to dream about. You didn't mourn me. You replaced me. He flinched as if I had slapped him. I had to survive. Myria was all I had left of you. We were both grieving. We turned to each other. Don't use my memory to justify your affair, I said. I knew you were seeing her before the flood. I saw the texts on your phone that morning. I was going to confront you at dinner. The river just did the dirty work for you. Serafina, please, he whispered. Myria is dying. Whatever happened in the past, she's your sister, you're a doctor, you have to save her. I will do my job, Darius, I said. I will follow the medical protocols, but don't expect me to care. To me, you're just a name on a form, and she's just a failing heart. I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the sterile light of the hallway. He thought he could still manipulate me. He didn't realize that the woman he left in the river was gone. This version of me didn't have a heart he could break. I spent the next morning running every test in the book. Myria's heart was a disaster. It was enlarged, the walls were thin, and it was barely pumping enough blood to keep her brain functioning. She was at 10% capacity. How am I? Myria asked when I went back to her room. Darius was gone, probably getting coffee or hiding. You're dying, Myria, I said plainly. Your heart is failing. Without a transplant, you have maybe a week, 10 days if you're lucky. Myria laughed, a dry, hacking sound. You love this, don't you? Seeing me like this. You're going to let me die for what happened. I don't have to let you do anything, I said. Your body is doing it all on its own. I'm just the one documenting the process. You have to help me, she sneered, her eyes flashing with a bit of her old fire. Family ties, Serafina. Think of Mom and Dad. They would want you to save me. Mom and Dad are dead, Myria, I said. They died 3 years ago. They died thinking their daughter drowned in a river, and you let them think that. You never told them I might have survived. You never even tried to look for me. Myria looked away, her jaw tightening. Darius said it was better this way, that it would be too much drama. We were happy. We had a good life until I got sick. A good life built on a lie, I said. And now the lie is falling apart. I am the head of the transplant committee here. I decide who gets the organs that become available. I follow the rules, Myria. I don't follow family ties. You're a monster, she whispered. No, I said, leaning over her bed. I'm the surgeon, and right now I'm the only thing standing between you and a wooden box. So I suggest you be very, very careful how you speak to me. I walked out of the room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the thrill of the power. For 10 years, they had held all the cards. Now I held their very lives. I was in my office late that night, staring at a scan of Myria's chest when the door opened. It was Darius. He didn't knock. He looked disheveled, his tie loosened and his eyes red. Get out, Darius, I said without looking up. I can't stay in that room with her anymore, he said, closing the door behind him. He walked toward my desk. She's a nightmare, Serafina. She's been a nightmare for years. I looked up, curious despite myself. What are you talking about? She's cruel, he said, his voice cracking. She spent all the insurance money. She's obsessed with her looks, with her social media followers. She treats me like a servant. Our marriage is a cage. You built the cage, Darius, I reminded him. You chose her over me. I was a fool, he cried, stepping closer. He looked at me with a sudden, desperate hunger. I see you now and I realize what I lost. You're brilliant. You're powerful. I've loved you all along, Serafina. I saved her because she told me she was pregnant that night in the car. It was a lie. She just wanted to make sure I picked her. I felt a wave of disgust. Whether he was lying now or she had lied then, it didn't matter. They were both snakes. I hate her, he whispered. I wish I had picked you. If you save her, I'll be stuck with her forever, but if things don't go well, we could start over, you and me. I still have the locket, Serafina. I found it in the mud a week later. I kept it. He reached for my hand. I felt my skin crawl. This man was willing to let his wife die, the woman he had supposedly killed for, just to save himself from a miserable marriage. You are a pathetic man, Darius, I said, pulling my hand away. I'm a man who made a mistake, he shouted. I didn't say anything. I just reached over and tapped my phone's screen. I had been recording the entire conversation. Get out, I said, my voice cold as death. Before I call security and have you banned from this hospital. He looked at the phone, then at me. The love in his eyes turned to pure, sharp fear. He backed out of the room without another word. The next morning, I stood in the boardroom for the weekly transplant committee meeting. 6 other doctors sat around the long mahogany table. On the screen was Myria's file. Patient 402, Myria Thorne, I said, my voice professional and steady. 32-year-old female, end-stage heart failure. She is a candidate for the 1A list. She needs an organ immediately. She's young, Dr. Aris, a senior surgeon, noted. That usually gives her priority. Yes, I said. However, her lifestyle history is a bit unclear. Her heart damage is consistent with long-term strain, possibly from chemical sources. I've ordered a full, strict toxicology screen. It's standard protocol, but I want it to be thorough. Is there a reason to suspect drug use? Dr. Solomon asked, looking at me curiously. The patient is very focused on her physical appearance, I said. She has a history of using extreme methods to maintain her weight. I want to make sure she's a compliant candidate. We don't waste hearts on people who won't take care of them. The board agreed. In the world of transplants, a heart is a gift. If you smoke, drink, or use drugs, you are moved to the bottom of the list. It's not about punishment, it's about survival rates. I went to Myria's room to oversee the blood draw. She was furious. I already gave blood yesterday, she screamed at the nurse. This is for the toxicology screen, Myria, I said, standing in the doorway. If you want a heart, you have to prove you're worth it. She went pale. Her eyes darted to her purse on the nightstand. I don't need a test. I'm clean. I'm your sister. Just put me on the top of the list. The list doesn't care who your sister is, I said. Give the blood, or I'll mark you as non-compliant right now. She hissed at the nurse and stuck out her arm. As the needle went in, I saw her grip the bedsheets. She was hiding something. I could smell the fear on her, and it smelled better than any perfume she had ever worn. While Myria was complaining about her rights, a second patient was admitted to the ward. His name was Titan. He was 28 years old, a middle school history teacher and a single father to a 4-year-old girl named Daisy. He had a congenital heart defect that had suddenly worsened. I went to see him that afternoon. His room was filled with hand-drawn pictures of dinosaurs and sunflowers. Daisy was sitting on his bed, reading him a book about space. Dr. Vane, Titan asked, his voice weak but warm. The nurses say you're the best. I try to be, I said, checking his vitals. He was a perfect candidate. He followed every instruction, he was in great physical shape otherwise, and his spirit was strong. I just need to be there for her, he whispered, looking at his daughter. Her mom died when she was a baby. I'm all she has. I'll do anything. I'll follow any rule. Just please. Give me a chance to see her grow up. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't ice. It was a dull ache. This man wanted to live for someone else. Myria wanted to live for herself. We're looking for a match, Titan, I said, and for the first time in years my voice wasn't entirely flat. Hang in there. When I walked out of the room, I checked the database. Titan and Myria were the same blood type. They were both 1A, they were both waiting for the same miracle. If a heart became available tonight, it would fit both of them. And as the head of the committee, the final tie-breaking vote would belong to me. On one hand, I had my twin sister, the girl I grew up with, the girl who shared my face. On the other hand, I had a stranger who was a good father and a good man. One deserved a heart, the other just wanted one, and I was the only one who could choose who got to keep breathing. By the next afternoon, word had spread that Myria might not be the top choice for the next heart. She had seen Titan in the hallway being wheeled to a test, and she had heard the nurses talking about his young daughter. She didn't feel sorry for him. She felt threatened. "You're going to give it to him, aren't you?" Myria spat when I entered her room. "The hero teacher. You're going to let your own sister die for a stranger." "I haven't made a decision yet," I said. "Liar," she screamed. "I know you. You've always been so self-righteous. You think you're better than me because you have a degree." An hour later, I was called to the hospital director's office. Inside was a man in a very expensive suit. He looked like a shark in human skin. "Dr. Vane," the director said, looking nervous. "This is Mr. Sterling. He's representing Mrs. Thorne." "A lawyer?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "In a hospital?" "My client believes there is a massive conflict of interest here," Sterling said, his voice smooth and cold. "You are the twin sister of the patient. You have a personal history involving a traumatic event. We are filing a formal complaint. We believe you are intentionally delaying my client's transplant out of a desire for personal revenge." "I am following medical protocol," I said. "The toxicology results are still pending." "If my client dies while you are following protocol, we will sue this hospital for everything it's worth," Sterling threatened. "And we will make sure your medical license is shredded. You can't be the judge and the executioner, Dr. Vane." The director looked at me. "Serafina, if this goes to the board, it looks bad. Maybe you should recuse yourself from this case." "No," I said, my voice firm. "I am the only one qualified to do this surgery. If you take me off the case, you're admitting I've done something wrong. I haven't. I'm doing my job." I walked out, my blood boiling. Myria was trying to sabotage my career to get what she wanted. She hadn't changed at all. She was still trying to drown me. I was sitting in the darkened cafeteria, staring at a cup of cold coffee, when Solomon sat down across from me. "The director told me about the lawyer," he said softly. "She's trying to destroy me," I said. "Again." "Serafina, what really happened 10 years ago?" he asked. "I've known you for 5 years and I don't even know where you're from. I just know you have a scar on your soul that hasn't healed." I looked at him. I saw the genuine worry in his eyes. For the first time in a decade, the wall cracked. I told him everything. I told him about the flash flood. I told him about the look in Darius's eyes when he kicked my hand away. I told him about washing up in the mud and watching my own funeral on a gas station TV. Solomon was silent for a long time. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. "You didn't just survive," he said. "You became something incredible. She's trying to use your past against you because she knows she can't beat you on the present. Don't let her." "If I give the heart to Titan, I look like a vengeful sister," I said. "If I give it to her, I'm rewarding a monster." "Follow the science," Solomon said. "The science doesn't have a grudge. If the toxicology report shows she's clean, she gets the heart. If not, she doesn't. You don't have to be the judge. The truth will be the judge." I leaned my head against his shoulder. It was the first time I had touched another person for comfort in 10 years. It felt like coming back to life. But I knew the battle wasn't over. The science was coming, and I had a feeling Myria wasn't going to like what it had to say. The toxicology results came back an hour later. I opened the file with a steady hand. The results were strange. The levels of most common drugs were 0, but there were masking agents present. Myria had used a flushing kit, a drink designed to hide chemicals in the blood. I went to her room. I didn't take a nurse. I wanted to see her face. "The test was inconclusive, Myria," I said. "You used a flushing agent. Why?" Myria looked at me, a slow, smug grin spreading across her blue-tinted lips. "I'm not stupid, Serafina. I knew you'd try to find something. I take supplements to stay thin. Darius likes me thin. If I don't look perfect, he looks at other women. I did what I had to do. Those supplements are illegal diet pills, I said. They're full of stimulants. That's what destroyed your heart, isn't it? You traded your health for a waistline. It worked, didn't it? She laughed. I kept him, I got the house, I got the life, and now I'm going to get the heart. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And just so you know, I've already written a letter. It's with my lawyer. If I die on your watch, or if I don't get that heart, that letter goes to every news station in the country. It tells the story of how Dr. Vane is actually a woman who faked her death and came back to murder her sister. Your career will be over. You'll be in a cell right next to where you think I should be. She was blackmailing me. She was holding my life over my head, just like she had 10 years ago. You really think you can win like this? I asked. I've already won, she said. I'm the victim here, I'm the dying twin, you're just the bitter doctor. Now get out and find me my heart. I walked out, but I didn't go to my office. I went to the security room. I had a theory. Myria was too energetic for someone with 10% heart function. She was getting a boost from somewhere. At 2:00 a.m., the phone in my office rang. It was the organ procurement coordinator. Dr. Vane, we have a match. A 24-year-old male, motorcycle accident, perfect health, blood type O positive. The heart is being harvested now. It'll be here in 4 hours. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The only heart available. The perfect match for both Myria and Titan. Who is the primary recipient? The coordinator asked. I'm reviewing the final data now, I said. I'll have a name for you in 30 minutes. Prep the surgical suite. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was quiet below. In 4 hours, one person would be saved, and the other would almost certainly die. I thought about Titan. I thought about him reading to his daughter. I thought about the way he thanked the nurses every time they brought him water. Then I thought about Myria. I thought about her lawyer, her blackmail letter, and her illegal pills. I knew what the moral choice was, but I also knew what the legal choice was. If I skipped Myria, her lawyer would pounce. The hospital would be under fire. I could lose everything I had worked for. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. 10 years ago, Darius had 4 seconds to choose. I had 30 minutes. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. I listened to Darius's voice again, his admission that he hated Myria and only wanted her money. Then I looked at the security footage I had pulled an hour ago. It showed Myria's husband, Darius, slipping a small plastic vial into her bedside drawer. They were still working together. They were still cheating the system. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Let's play. I picked up the phone. The recipient is Myria Thorne. Start the pre-op prep. Darius was waiting for me in the hallway outside the surgical wing. When I told him we were prepping Myria, he let out a long, theatrical sigh of relief. Thank you, Serafina, he said, trying to look grateful. I knew you'd do the right thing. You're a good person. I'm doing what is medically required, I said, my voice empty. Listen, he said, stepping closer. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. About the other night, I was emotional. I didn't mean those things about hatting her. We're going to be fine. Once she has the heart, everything goes back to normal. Does it? I asked. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a copy of a police report from 10 years ago. I know you used a fake ID to get your medical degree, Serafina. I looked into the records after I saw you. If you don't finish this surgery perfectly, or if you try anything, I'll report you for fraud. You'll lose your license and go to jail for 10 years. He wasn't just begging anymore. He was threatening me. He didn't want Myria to live because he loved her. He wanted her to live because her family trust fund was tied to her being alive and married. If she died, he got nothing. You're a busy man, Darius, I said, looking at the paper. Blackmail, fraud, and nursing a sick wife. How do you find the time? Just do the surgery, he hissed. Give her the heart and I'll burn this paper. We both get what we want. I doubt that, I said. I walked away toward the sterile zone. I had a heart on the way, a sister who was a drug user, a husband who was a blackmailer, and a young father who was dying in room 405. I felt a strange sense of calm. The pieces were all on the board. Now I just had to make the final move. The pre-op for Myria was a show. I had the nurses move her to the holding area. I had the IVs started. Darius and the lawyer were allowed to stand in the viewing gallery, thinking they had won. Myria was gloating. "I told you," she whispered as I checked her monitors. "I always get what I want. See you on the other side, sister." "Actually," I said, leaning close to her ear, "we're having a little delay. The ethics board has called an emergency session. They're meeting in the conference room right now." "What?" she gasped. "The heart is almost here. You can't stop now." "I'm not stopping anything," I said. "I'm just presenting the final evidence. It's part of the transplant integrity protocol. You wouldn't want any conflict of interest to ruin your new heart, would you?" I left her there, panicking, and walked into the boardroom. The hospital director, the legal team, and the other 5 members of the transplant committee were already there. Solomon was at the head of the table, looking grave. Darius and the lawyer burst into the room. "What is the meaning of this?" Sterling shouted. "My client is in pre-op. This is harassment." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," I said, taking my place at the podium. "This isn't about harassment. This is about the law and the safety of our patients." I opened a folder and laid it on the table. "I have new evidence regarding patient 402's eligibility, evidence that was discovered less than an hour ago." I looked at Darius. He was glaring at me, his hand in his pocket, probably clutching the fraud papers. He thought he had me trapped. He didn't realize that I was the one who had spent 10 years learning how to survive. "Dr. Vane," the director said, "the heart is 20 minutes away. Whatever you have to say it fast." "Certainly," I said. I turned on the projector. First, I played the recording of Darius from my office. His voice filled the room, clear and cold. "I hate her. She's a nightmare. I wish I had picked you. We could start over." The board members looked at Darius with disgust. Myria's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "That's just a bitter husband," Sterling tried to argue. "It has nothing to do with her medical status." "Wait," I said. I pulled up the security footage from Myria's room. It showed Darius leaning over the bed, sneaking a small vial into the drawer. "And here," I said, pulling a physical object out of my pocket. It was the plastic vial. "I found this in the patient's room during pre-op. It's a concentrated stimulant, the same supplements that caused her heart failure. She's been taking them while in the hospital, while on the transplant list." "She's an addict," Solomon said, his voice hard. "No," Darius screamed. "I was just giving her vitamins." "These are not vitamins, Darius," I said. "They are a direct violation of the transplant agreement. She signed a contract stating she would remain substance-free. She lied. She used a masking agent to trick this board, and you helped her." I looked at the board. By the rules of this hospital and the National Organ Procurement Network, any patient who is non-compliant or uses illicit substances is immediately disqualified and removed from the list. The room was silent. Even the lawyer couldn't find a word to say. The evidence was right there, on the screen and on the table. "There's more," I said. I looked directly at the lawyer. "Mr. Sterling, you mentioned a letter your client wrote, a letter claiming I faked my death and am seeking revenge." Sterling stammered. I don't know what you're talking about." "I do," I said. "And I welcome it, because if that letter goes public, it will trigger an investigation. An investigation into why my husband accidentally saved my sister instead of me. An investigation into the life insurance fraud he committed 3 months later." I looked at Darius. He looked like he was about to faint. "I have the forensic evidence from the river site," I lied, though I knew the threat was enough. "And I have the recording of you admitting you knew who was who in the water." You can't prove that," Darius whispered. "I don't have to," I said. "The ethics board has enough to disqualify Myria right now. And the police, they're already on their way to discuss the blackmail you tried to pull in the hallway. I recorded that too." I turned back to the committee. The heart is 10 minutes away. We have a second candidate, Titan Reed. He is 100% compliant. He is a match. He has a 4-year-old daughter who needs a father. According to the rules, he is now the primary recipient. The director looked around the room. Does anyone object? Silence. The motion is carried, the director said, his voice firm. Dr. Vane, get to the OR. Prep Mr. Reed. I didn't wait. I turned and walked out of the room. As I passed Darius, I saw him collapse into a chair, his face buried in his hands. He had lost the money, he had lost the sister, and he had lost the wife. He was exactly where he deserved to be, alone. The hallway was a blur of activity. Change of plans, I shouted to the nursing staff. Abort Thorne's surgery, get Titan Reed to OR1, now. Myria was still in the holding area. When she saw the nurses start to unhook her IVs, she began to scream. What are you doing? Where's my heart, Serafina? I walked over to her. I looked down at the woman who had stolen my life, my husband, and my peace. The heart isn't yours, Myria, I said. You broke the rules. You chose the pills over the transplant. You chose the lie over the truth. You're killing me, she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure, ugly rage. You're murdering your own sister. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm saving a father. You're the one who killed yourself. You did it one pill at a time. The nurses wheeled her back toward the regular ward. She was kicking and screaming like a child, but her body was too weak to do much. Her fans and her beauty couldn't save her now. She was just a woman with a failing heart and a hollow soul. I went into the scrub room. I washed my hands, the hot water and soap stinging my skin. I looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in 10 years, the reflection didn't look like a ghost. It looked like a doctor. Solomon walked in and started scrubbing next to me. You did it, he whispered. The science did it, I said. No, he said, looking at me. You did. You stood up to the fire, Serafina. Now go save that man. I nodded. I pulled on my mask, snapped on my gloves, and walked into the operating room. The lights were bright, the air was cold, and the heart was on its way. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Inside the OR, the world outside didn't exist. There was no Darius, no Myria, no sinking car. There was only the steady beep of the monitor and the delicate, rhythmic dance of my hands. Titan's old heart was a mess, scarred and weak. I carefully disconnected the vessels, my movements precise and sure. When I finally lifted the diseased organ out of his chest, it felt like I was lifting a weight off my own soul. The donor heart arrived in a sterile cooler. It was beautiful, firm, pink, and full of potential. I began the process of sewing it in, stitch by stitch. Vitals are steady, Solomon said from the head of the table. He's doing great, Serafina. I didn't answer. I was focused on the last connection. When I finally released the clamps, the new heart stayed still for a second. Then it gave a small, tentative shiver. Thump. Then another. Thump. The rhythm grew stronger, steady and powerful. The monitor reflected the change. Beep, beep, beep. We have a heartbeat, I said, a small breath of relief escaping my lips. I finished the closing, my hands never shaking. When I walked out of the OR, the sun was just beginning to rise over the city. I was exhausted, my back ached, and I smelled of blood and sweat. But I felt light. I went to the waiting room. Titan's sister was there, holding little Daisy. They both looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. The surgery was a success, I said, and I actually let myself smile. Titan is going to be just fine. Daisy let out a little cheer and hugged her aunt. Seeing that little girl's joy was worth more than any revenge I could have planned. I had given someone a future, and in doing so, I had finally found my own. I was sitting in my office, finishing the surgical report, when there was a knock on the door. It was Darius. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His clothes were wrinkled, and he looked smaller, as if the air had been let out of his ego. He didn't have his lawyer with him. What do you want, Darius? I asked, not looking up. The trust fund, he whispered. Myria's family trust. It's being frozen. Because of the non-compliance and the investigation into the pills. They're saying the marriage might be void if I was endangering her. That sounds like a personal problem, I said. I'm bankrupt, Serafina, he said, his voice breaking. I have nothing. The house is leveraged. The cars are being repossessed. I need your help. You're rich. You're the chief. Just give me enough to get a lawyer, for old time's sake. I finally looked up. I leaned back in my chair and stared at him. For old time's sake? You mean the time you kicked my hand away in a sinking car? Or the time you threatened to throw me in jail for fraud? I was desperate, he cried. No, you were greedy, I said. You chose the wrong sister twice, Darius. You chose Myria because you thought she was easier to control, and then you stayed with her because you wanted her money. You never loved either of us. You only love yourself. Serafina, please. I'm not your wife, and I'm not your savior, I said. I'm the woman you tried to kill, and I'm telling you to leave my hospital before I call the police to finish what we started in the boardroom. He looked at me, and for the first time, he realized there was no Serafina left for him to charm. I was a stranger to him. He turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped. He had traded a woman of substance for a woman of mirrors, and now the mirrors were shattered and the substance was gone. He was a ghost in a suit, wandering the halls of a life he had forfeited 10 years ago. I went to see Myria one last time before she was transferred to a state-run long-term care facility. She wasn't in the VIP suite anymore. She was in a small, cramped room in the basement level, hooked up to a machine that was doing the work her heart couldn't. She looked small in the bed. Her hair was greasy, and the makeup she had insisted on wearing was smeared across her pale face. You come to gloat, she whispered, her voice barely a thread. No, I said, standing by the window. I came to say goodbye. You think you're so much better than me, she said, a tiny spark of bitterness still in her eyes. But you're just like me. You're alone. I'm not alone, Myria, I said. I have a life I built with my own hands. I have colleagues who respect me. I have a man who actually knows my name. You have nothing but a machine and a husband who is already looking for his next victim. She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a line through the dirt on her cheek. I just wanted to be beautiful. I just wanted people to look at me. They did look at you, I said, but they never saw you. That's the tragedy, Myria. You spent your whole life trying to be a reflection and you forgot how to be a person. I looked at her for a long minute. I wanted to feel hate, but I only felt pity. She was a victim of her own vanity, a casualty of a war she had started for a prize that wasn't worth winning. I hope you find peace, I said, but you won't find it with my heart, or anyone else's until you find one of your own. I walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me, a final, heavy sound. I didn't look back. I was leaving the shadows of the past in that basement room. I was walking back up into the light. The police were waiting in the lobby. I had spent the morning working with the hospital's legal team. I had handed over the fraud papers Darius had used to blackmail me, but I had also handed over something else, the records of the life insurance payout from 10 years ago. I watched from the mezzanine as the officers approached Darius near the coffee shop. Darius Thorne, the lead officer asked. Yes, Darius looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes, probably thinking they were there for me. You're under arrest for insurance fraud and grand larceny, the officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. We have evidence that you knowingly filed a false death claim and forged the signatures of the beneficiary while knowing the victim was still potentially alive. What? No, that's a mistake, Darius shouted as they pulled his arms behind his back. The people in the lobby stopped to stare. Some of them pulled out their phones to record the scene. Darius, the man who loved attention, was finally getting it. He looked up and saw me standing on the mezzanine. He screamed something, a curse or a plea, but I couldn't hear it over the noise of the hospital. I watched as they led him out the sliding glass doors and into a waiting patrol car. He was gone. The man who had haunted my dreams for a decade was finally behind bars. I looked at the silver locket I was holding in my hand, the one the police had recovered from his pocket during the search. I walked over to the trash can and dropped it inside. It didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to a girl who drowned in a river, and she didn't need it where she was going. I turned and walked toward the recovery ward. I had a patient to check on. I had a life to lead. 3 days later, I walked into Titan's room. He was sitting up in bed, looking more alive than he had in months. His color was back, and his eyes were bright. Daisy was sitting on his lap, showing him a new drawing. This one was of a doctor with a very tall hat. "Dr. Vane," Titan said, his voice strong. "I don't know how to thank you. I feel like I can run a marathon." "Let's start with walking to the bathroom first," I joked, checking his incision. It was healing perfectly. "I heard about the other patient," Titan said, his voice dropping. "I'm sorry, I know she was your sister." "She made her choices, Titan," I said. "You made yours. You're a good man. You deserve this chance." He took my hand, his grip firm and warm. "I won't waste it, I promise." I looked at Daisy. She reached out and gave me a small, sticky hug. "Thank you for fixing my daddy," she whispered. I felt a lump in my throat. For 10 years, I had been cold. I had been a machine. But in that moment, the ice finally melted. I wasn't just a surgeon anymore. I was a person who had made a difference. I walked out of the room and saw Solomon waiting for me in the hall. He didn't say anything. He just held out a cup of coffee and a small, wrapped sandwich. "You look like you need to eat," he said. "I'm starving," I admitted. We walked down the hall together, shoulder to shoulder. The hospital was humming with life, a million stories unfolding in every room. But for the first time, my story wasn't one of tragedy. It was a story of survival. I was Serafina Vane. I had been drowned, betrayed, and hunted, and I had come out on the other side with my hands full of life. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a beautiful hotel, looking out at the city lights. I was wearing a dark green silk dress, and my hair was down. I looked like a woman who was at peace. A video played on my phone. It was from Titan. He was in a park running after Daisy. He looked healthy, happy, and full of life. He waved at the camera. "Thank you, Dr. Vane. We're doing great." I smiled and tucked the phone away. "You ready?" a voice asked. I turned to see Solomon. He was wearing a tuxedo, looking handsome and calm. He walked over and took my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine. "The gala is starting," he said. "They're waiting for the Surgeon of the Year to make her speech." "I'm ready," I said. We walked into the ballroom. It was filled with music, laughter, and light. I saw my colleagues, my friends, and a future that was wide open. Myria was gone. She had passed away 3 months ago, her body finally giving up. Darius was in a federal prison, serving a 12-year sentence for fraud and blackmail. The past was a closed book, buried in the mud of a river that no longer had power over me. I stepped up to the podium. I looked out at the faces of people who respected me for who I was, not who I pretended to be. 10 years ago, I began, my voice clear and strong, I thought my life ended in a cold river. I thought that betrayal was the final word in my story, but I was wrong. I looked at Solomon, who was watching me with pride. "My husband took my sister by mistake 10 years ago," I said, a small, knowing smile on my lips. And honestly, it was the best thing he ever did for me, because it forced me to find the heart I never knew I had. The crowd erupted in applause. I stepped down, not as a victim and not as a ghost. I was Serafina, and I was finally truly alive.